This is the story of how Jaafar Jackson went from sending a single-voice memo to dancing until his feet bled, and how he ended up the only person cast to bring his uncle back to life on screen in the 2026 biopic Michael. By his own account, the process took roughly 2 years, and it was less a role than an ordeal. People assume they understand what that kind of transformation costs, he has suggested, but few actually do. Jaafar didn't simply memorize choreography. He had to unlearn his own posture, his own voice, his own walk, and rebuild himself around the memory of a man the entire world still watches obsessively. He has described the process as beautiful, but also as agony, and has said that watching himself slowly turn into Michael on camera was an emotional experience in itself. Michael Jackson's signature spins were reportedly one of the hardest things to relearn. Over roughly 3 years of training, Jaafar worked to retrain his own natural sense of balance and momentum. Mornings, he said, sometimes began with a body so sore he wasn't sure he could stand. When the exhaustion became overwhelming, he leaned on a single guiding question: what would Michael do? Treating it almost like a daily discipline. Separately, images and clips purporting to show an emotional moment from Jaafar after filming have circulated online, drawing comparisons to Michael himself. As with much of the online chatter around the production, the full context behind those images hasn't been independently confirmed, and they've mostly fueled speculation rather than clarity. Long before Jaafar was cast, producer Graham King and director Antoine Fuqua reportedly spent close to 2 years searching for their lead, and they weren't interested in an impersonator. Close to 200 people were said to have been considered: professional Michael Jackson tribute performers, trained actors, viral dancers. According to King, none of it felt right, because what they needed wasn't technical precision so much as something harder to fake, a sense of lived-in authenticity. As the search dragged on, there was a growing, half-serious fear on the production that the only person who could truly play Michael Jackson was Michael Jackson. The story goes that Jaafar's real audition wasn't an audition at all. It was a voice note sent directly to Graham King, in which Jaafar spoke softly in the same hushed, guarded cadence Michael was known for. King has said he'd seen footage of Jaafar performing years earlier, but had been reluctant to cast a family member until that recording stopped him cold. He's described feeling something unmistakably Michael in it. Whether or not the details of this account are precisely accurate, it's the origin story production has put forward. After 2 years of formal searching, it was reportedly a single informal recording that convinced them they'd found their lead. Before this project, Jaafar had essentially no film or television acting experience. By his own description, little more than a brief reality TV appearance. He was suddenly expected to anchor one of the most scrutinized biopics in years. Rather than panic, he says he went quiet and started working. Graham King reportedly brought in acting coaches to break him down and rebuild him scene by scene. Jaafar has said he'd never once considered acting as a career before that phone call, and that he approached the learning curve, what he calls steep and unforgiving, as motivation rather than a handicap, since he felt he had nothing to lose. The physical cost of the dance training has been a recurring theme in Jaafar's interviews. He said plainly that his feet would sometimes bleed or go numb during rehearsals. Michael's famous stage loafers had smooth, treadless soles built for gliding rather than grip, which meant every slightly mistimed pivot could result in blisters or bruising. Getting used to dancing in shoes with zero traction was, he said, an entirely new challenge for him. When the temptation to ease off crept in, he says a more stubborn instinct, the idea that Michael never quit, usually won out. Jaafar has also talked about the sheer physical demand of filming itself. A single performance sequence might need to be shot 20 to 30 times in a day, and matching the same explosive energy on take 1 and take 25, he said, was one of the harder lessons of the shoot. He described learning to treat rest strategically, knowing exactly when to shut down so he could switch back on, and by the end of production, his cardiovascular conditioning reportedly rivaled that of an athlete rather than a first-time actor. When Jaafar's casting was announced, an obvious question followed online. Why not Prince or B.G. Jackson? Prince has reportedly said dancing and the vocal demands of the role were never something he felt drawn to, and that he prefers working behind the camera. B.G. Jackson, described as intensely private, has similarly gravitated toward directing rather than performing. The suggestion from those close to production is that shared genetics weren't enough on their own. What mattered was that Jaafar had spent years quietly developing his musicianship and movement, putting him in a position no one could have fully anticipated. To try to understand the isolation his uncle reportedly felt, Jaafar has said he moved back into Havenhest, the Jackson family's longtime compound, where thriller-era choreography was originally developed. He's described sleeping in different rooms throughout the house, on a thin mattress laid on the floor rather than a bed, simply to try to feel some residue of the space's history. The old dance studio there reportedly became both his primary training space and something closer to a personal proving ground. By several accounts, Jaafar converted a spare room into a kind of obsessive study space. Walls covered in choreography notes, timelines, and personal affirmations. Antoine Fuqua has reportedly compared the room to the evidence wall aesthetic of A Beautiful Mind. A described turning point came when the Jackson estate gave Jaafar access to some of Michael's private journals, handwritten poems, daily mantras, and more unguarded reflections. Jaafar has called encountering that material a breaking point of sorts, after which he began writing his own affirmations directly on the walls. Preparation, in his telling, stopped being purely physical and became something closer to psychological immersion. One of the more unusual technical elements of the film involves the vocals. Jaafar has explained that during performance sequences, he sang live on top of Michael's original recorded tracks, so what audiences hear is a blend of both voices. In the more intimate a cappella scenes, however, it's reportedly Jaafar's voice alone. Music supervisor John Warhurst has apparently noted how strikingly similar their vocal instruments are, a natural, unteachable similarity that became a key part of the film's sound. Maintaining Michael's lean physique reportedly required Jaafar to sustain very low body fat for more than 2 years, through reshoots and schedule delays, with meals tracked closely. A production source described the discipline as something that visibly aged him but also toughened him, to the point that crew members reportedly did double takes at the physical resemblance once filming resumed. According to Jaafar, no one in his family knew about the project for a full year, including his mother. His father, Jermaine, has said he sensed Jaafar was working on something, but the full picture was kept from his mother specifically. Jaafar's reasoning, as he's described it, was that once she knew, she'd carry the weight of the Jackson legacy and the scrutiny that would come with it, and he wanted to find his own footing in the role first. When his mother, Alejandra, eventually visited the set, seeing her son physically and vocally transform into her late brother-in-law was reportedly disorienting for her, described as both strange and moving. As of Jaafar's more recent interviews, he said his father had not yet seen the finished film, and that the anticipation of that reaction weighed on him heavily, given how much shared history Jermaine had with Michael that no script could fully replicate. Jaafar has spoken warmly about his castmates. Coleman Domingo, who plays Joseph Jackson, reportedly greeted him early on with a simple, supportive embrace that Jaafar sustained with him throughout filming. Nia Long, playing Katherine Jackson, brought what he's described as a maternal warmth that helped him access difficult emotional territory without feeling like he was navigating alone. Michael's stage shoes were notoriously smooth-soled, with no rubber tread, built for gliding, not stability. Jaafar has said finding and adapting to a matching pair was genuinely difficult, since a lack of traction punished any imbalance. He reportedly kept one pair from the shoot and still uses them occasionally in rehearsal, treating the wear on them as something closer to a memento of the process. From the outset, Fuqua reportedly set a clear rule: no impersonation on set. Jaafar has said he took that instruction seriously, coming to understand that technically executing a moonwalk is very different from making an audience believe it. He described focusing on the intent behind small gestures, a tilted hat, a glance away, rather than simply reproducing them. Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, was reportedly brought to set quietly. Upon seeing Jaafar in costume, she said to have gone silent before quietly remarking that it was like seeing a ghost. The Jackson estate later released a statement echoing that sentiment, saying Jaafar embodies Michael. Asked what his uncle would make of the performance, Jaafar has said he hopes Michael will be proud of